This is the Quantum Biology Podcast, where we break down the practical health applications of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. My name is Jason Oke, and for those of you I haven't met, I am one of the other co-founders of the Quantum Biology Collective and Quantum Health TV, along with Meredith. And I'm really excited today to bring you our special guest for this episode, Taylor Davidson. Hey, Taylor.
Hey, Jason. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to meet you in person and great to have you here. Taylor is the founder of Football Entangled, and I think many of you have seen his Instagram feed. He's got tens of thousands of followers now, and Taylor is professionally coaches football players, soccer players, and other athletes, and how to improve their form and their performance. And it's built in a lot of circadian and kind of quantum biology practices into that. And so it's great to have you here, and love to talk a little bit more about that and how that's going. But would love to hear a little bit first about kind of what's your what's your story, what's your background, kind of how did you get to where you are today? Because you started off as an athlete, right? Like you were a professional level athlete yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, my story is, I guess one of the classic stories is just a kid from America that wanted to reach the heights of professional soccer or football in Europe, watching the best players on TV and wanting to emulate them, and be that guy playing in the Champions League, playing in the Premier League. And that was kind of like the drive that pushed myself throughout high school and college. And along the way, I encountered like many injuries. Like most notably, I fractured my foot when I was playing in Greece after high school. And I was like on the verge of like signing like that big like first team like men's contract with a big club in Greece. And the day before, I fractured my foot in the warm up, like jogging. And it's just one of those when the doctors say, oh, it's just bad luck, like stress fracture. And that was kind of the first things that really was like a catalyst in my mind. I was like, how could this happen? How could it just be bad luck? Like, how could it just be like a stress fracture? Like there has to be some actual reason why this happened. And that was kind of where I got into this mode of research and analysis into the human body, into human health, into obviously like bone density and the foot, obviously. And that was the first kind of big injury that had me kind of go back to the drawing board, so to speak, in terms of what I thought was health and what I thought was the mitochondrial function. Years later, I tore my ACL in college college soccer, playing Division I college soccer for Cal State Fullerton here in California. And I tore my ACL in a spring friendly game. And that one I was out for about a year and a half. And that is again another a trauma that causes you to go, okay, everything I did the last few years turns out like maybe it was good, but it's not good enough. And now I have to really go again, go to the drawing board, toss it out, and acquire a whole new paradigm. And so every little step got me more and more understanding of quantum health and the mitochondrial function and fascia and how the human body really works from a base level.
Do you remember what was it? Where did you find this? What was your entry point? Did you stumble across like a blog post or a podcast or like reading scientific papers? How did you come into this in the first place?
Probably I think thinking back, the first time I ever heard of mitochondria was I think it was a Ben Greenfield podcast talking to Dr. Jack Cruz. I was in the car on the way home from college, and I just put it on, and he was like I got a rant about like protons and and electrons, and I was like, what is this? Because before that point, I just had, it was always okay, like fats, proteins, carbs, and thinking that diet, is the end all and be all of health. And that really opened my eyes to how your environment is like so much more important.
Yeah, it's funny how so many of us came into this space through Dr. Jack Cruz. Right? And the first time you listen to him, he's like dropping all these bombs of truth. Like, you understand maybe 5% of it. You're like, there's something here, and I'd love to figure out more of it, but I have no idea what this guy's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he had like decades worth of blogs on his website, and I've been through quite a bit and just got myself to the pretty decent point of knowledge, I guess. But I mean, there's always more. There's always more from his world.
So once you came across this stuff, did you start implementing it in your own kind of personal training at first?
Yeah, of course. It was always, I was and still am kind of like the guinea pig for all the new science and research and things that I'm trying on myself to then eventually like the things that come through the filter as actually effective in myself is then what I bring to like my clients and my athletes.
So what kind of stuff did you notice when you first started doing it? Did you see a big impact or a big change at first?
Well, the first thing that I really realized is like, how could as an athlete, like how could I like be like pale? Like you should be healthy, like have good skin and like be in the sun. And that was kind of one of the first big transformations that I went through. Is like, I was born and raised in like a beach town in California, and I never went to the beach as a kid. I was always on the field playing soccer, and then I was at home playing video games. And then now this understanding of how nature works and how sunlight and light and the magnetism works, this gave me the actual scientific reasoning for why I should be at the beach. And so then understanding how important it is to be out in the sun almost, like most of the day, is to transform my recovery, transform my like aesthetic as a man, and having good skin and having healthy like bones and everything in between. I think even that on its own is an amazing transformation. But that was probably when I was like 19 or 20 when I really understood all that.
Did you notice any change in your athletic performance as well? Like, was there a shift in how you were performing on the field or in the gym?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's very obvious once you get over that initial hurdle of the sun, like kind of overtaxing you to the point where you become like almost like sun driven. Because a lot of my clients, like when they're first trying to get themselves into the sun more often, the sun makes them tired, and this is kind of like an initial like hurdle that you must get over. And then once you're over that hurdle and you've kind of improved your ability to actually assimilate the light into the skin and into your cells, then you actually become driven and you gain energy by being in the sun. So that was one of the major things I noticed off the field and then on the field as well.
How did you make the transition from kind of being a player and an athlete yourself to then wanting to coach other people and bring this knowledge to everyone else?
Well, the biggest thing is I just see so many injuries on every team and on every league and in every country in the world. And I saw thousands and thousands of people that were in my shoes, 15 years old, the wants to be the best player in the world and is trying to do it, but is just a lot of the advice out there was and is failing them. And so I wanted to kind of get my voice out there and try to help people. Which was about in like March 2020, so like right when COVID started. I just got the initiative to go online and build a platform.
And how's the response been?
I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, like we have a community of around 250 members inside my tribe, as well as like thousands of members that have paid for like one-time products that all build towards this quantum health understanding and working with nature. And I mean, on social media itself, there's always people that are going to be against like natural solutions, and even people that will just kind of attack and make fun of things that are common sense. But that's the way things are these days. For the most part, it's been a hugely positive response, because most people, once they realize like how common sense this is, they're like, oh yeah, duh. like I should be in the sun most of the day. Like,
So, I mean, walk us through like when you're sitting down with a client with an athlete for the first time and trying to kind of explain this, induct them into this world. Like, what does that look like? Can you kind of walk us through what are the principles that you try to lay out, and how do you kind of explain it to somebody who doesn't know about this?
yeah. So in my framework, I kind of built a 3-pillar system, and the first pillar is the inner furnace, which is mostly focused on the mitochondrial or on the quantum health aspect. The second pillar is the internal foundation, which is a lot more about like your functional athletic ability. And then the third portion is the game, which is really just about soccer, about football. And I try to put these things into those pillars so it kind of helps them to understand the framework of how we are what I call a reverse engineering some talent. And so that first pillar, the inner furnace, is really controlling your environment and putting yourself in the best spot for optimal health and vitality. And it is hard sometimes when I'm working with like professional athletes because they're so ingrained into what they know. But at the same time, those guys also have a lot of freedom because of their finances. And contrary to common thought, those pro athletes do have a lot of time on their hands. So they really do have the ability to apply these things if they choose to. So a lot of times it's just getting them like mentally over the stump and like buying in.
I love that language of inner furnace.
Yeah.
Describe the mitochondria. I think that's it's a genius way of putting it. And I love the way you talk about it. It's really cool.
Thank
you. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you talk about kind of getting back to basics, and it's, when you look at the backstories of so many of the elite famous soccer players over the years, whether it's Pele or Messi, so many of these guys grew up kind of poor and playing outside, and they weren't necessarily, getting the right nutrition or whatever, but they were getting natural sunlight. They were playing outdoors. They were playing barefoot because they couldn't afford cleats or boots. Right. And it's really interesting. I've always found that fascinating, that like a big part of that story for so many players has been like they grew up playing outdoors because that was their only option.
Yeah, it's almost polar opposite to what you see in the Western world, where you have these trainers and you have these camps and you have all these kind of like very like structured like play, as opposed to the unstructured free play that you see in the favelas and the barrios in the streets, where they're outside all day with their friends in the fresh air, in the sunlight, barefoot, just playing the sport they love for hours on end.
So how do people respond when you lay out these principles and kind of, explaining to somebody what a mitochondria is for the first time? Like, how do people respond to it? Like, did you find people lean into it, or do people kind of resist it? Like, what's the response to them?
I think the response is pretty good once someone just has an open mind. That's the main thing. Just once someone gets to the point where they're ready to change, then the change itself isn't too hard. It just comes back down to the individual usually. And I think also one of the big things is when people make an investment in themselves, then the change is a lot easier to come by, as opposed to how often people ignore or don't act on the free stuff they have around. And then once they make a financial investment, then it's really easy for them to make a real change in their life.
What's the practice look like today? Are you starting to do stuff like, do you get people and actually do camps and meet with people in person? Are you doing mostly online? Like, how do you work with patients and athletes?
Yeah. So we first, we have the Football Entangled private community, the tribe, which is about 250 members right now, and it's on an app, and I have courses and programs all in there, and there's moderators in there helping people work through issues, and that's a whole little community on its own, where there's a bunch of action every day. And then outside of that, I work one-on-one with like professional clients online who need like the personal attention. And actually, in November, I hosted my first like in-person meetup in London, and we had about 20 members from London come out, and we played some football for about 2 hours at like the local cage, basically like the turf, like indoor field. And yeah, that was like my first in-person event. And in the future, we're looking to hold more in-person events for like something like an annual like retreat, like an off-season thing, like for some of the semi-pro and professional footballers.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
So, what are some of the tools that you're laying out for people? You talked to them about blue blocking glasses. You talking about cold plunges, like that, all that kind of stuff. What are, you walk through some of the kind of specifics they get into with people about how to optimize your inner furnace?
Yeah. So I mean, the first thing is like sun gazing in the morning for the sunrise, and of course also the sunset. And then it would be just as much full body sunlight as you can throughout the day to build your solar callus. Then I don't really push on people to do like cold plunges in the context of like having like a bath in their backyard, but I really do push people that if there's a ocean or a lake or like a river by you, to go out and get in there. And then at the same time, I do actually really have people do these 60 or 90-minute hot baths where it gets your body temperature up to 100, 102 Fahrenheit to basically recreate like a fever. And this is like a contrast that I'll do after like an ocean swim. And so I'm really trying to push people's limits in terms of the thermogenesis. And then there's even things like I really recommend people like don't wear like synthetic clothing and all these different synthetic fibers that can affect the voltage across your skin. That obviously is going to affect the voltage in your mitochondria. So that was quite a few things in the inner furnace. Well, one of the other things that we do talk a lot about is the importance of like food, but looking at the work of a man named Jonas van der Planet who talks about like raw food and eating like a raw primal diet. And I think this actually has an interesting like overlap in terms of like the food and the mitochondrial health, where like are you actually absorbing the electrons from food if it's like burnt or cooked or baked versus if it's raw and fresh and has the alive bacteria and enzymes in the food itself. So that's one of the interesting crossovers that I talk about a lot.
It's really cool. So what kind of responses have you seen in your clients? So like, are you seeing people make breakthroughs and kind of get to a different level of performance than they were doing before? You have any success stories you can share kind of without revealing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like we had one really cool kid from South Korea that he had a fractured fifth metatarsal, actually the same bone that I fractured back when I was 18. He basically recovered in half the time than the doctors said he would recover with surgery, and he recovered in half the time without surgery. And it was just from a combination of all the different inner furnace principles.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So when we had a client that plays in the Premier League, he was out for about 2 years with this like really nagging nerve issue in his glutes, and we kind of got him fixed up, and he got back playing, and he was a starter for like half the season and earned a renewal on his contract, which was about to run out if he didn't start playing. So that was a big one for us.
That's amazing. Congratulations. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like there are clues and hints more and more that I think a lot of the top professionals are using this stuff, but I feel like sometimes they don't want to quite come out and talk about it publicly either, because it's like revealing a trade secret about something that's an edge. But we've heard stories of everything from like NBA and NFL teams that are starting to build red light panels and look into the training rooms, to professional Premier League players who are using this stuff. I think Eric Holland has talked a little bit publicly about wearing and stuff like that. So I feel like you're going to start hearing it more and more from some of these top athletes. So this is now part of their kind of protocol, how they stay on top of their game.
Yeah, I think eventually it's going to be everywhere. It just in terms of like how it's how it's phrased, or how it's shown, and the context is controlled. Because yeah, like you're saying, a lot of like the incumbent, health experts in some of these big clubs, they're not exactly open-minded to these things. Even though there's like lots and lots of science out there to support all these different protocols. It's just a matter of kind of getting into that mainstream consciousness. And also there's just a bias to, like to sell supplements and to sell different forms of, actually the funniest thing is some of these clubs, they spend 10, 20, 30, 40 grand on these different kind of equipment. And they could be getting a lot more benefits by just going out in the sun and getting grounded and wearing like blue blockers,
Yeah. One of the things that you talk about a lot is the importance of fascia, and kind of how the fascial connections throughout your body are one of the main driving things behind superior athletic performance and condition. I mean, you probably talk about fascia almost as much as Carrie B Wellness does. I think you guys are the two people who geek out on that more than anybody else. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that became a part of your practice, and kind of how that connects to all the other stuff, mitochondria and everything we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting connection point of mitochondria and fascia kind of going the opposite directions, but then they come back to connect if you really understand this whole, well, just the body is not just muscle. I think that's one of the things that all athletes have a hard time realizing, that like your quad and your hamstring and your glutes, those are muscles, or those are things that humans have created names for, just so we can understand like anatomy and try to make a map of the body. But in reality, like in the brain doesn't actually the brain doesn't care or know muscles in that context individually. The brain just knows muscles as existing inside pockets of one big fascial system that help certain limbs do certain movements. And so this kind of understanding of the body as one unit is kind of like my big push. And for people to realize that like strength is not really just about like how much you can lift in a certain pattern, but really strength is like a result of the whole being integrated, and not just how big the parts are. And that's kind of a big shift away from the gym that Football Entangled is about. Is in the gym, like you really just train the size or how much you can lift in this very specific stance and range of movement. Whereas on the field, those things never exist. On the field, the way your body operates is usually never the exact same, because you have so many different factors that and variables that are affecting what you're doing on the field in terms of of opponents and the ball and tactics and positioning and just emotion.
I think one of the things that you do a lot on Instagram is repost shots of various football players working out in the gym and like you that like isolated bicep curls or isolated leg lifts or whatever, and pointing out that there's a direct line sometimes between that and the injuries that they end up getting a few months later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the big things, is because like people in life usually don't want to make a change until they realize that what they did in the past didn't work, and the pain of injury is usually that that event that causes people to reassess. So that's like one of the best ways on social media to make a point, is to show, okay, this guy did all this stuff, then he got injured, and the physio said it was bad luck, but if you look, we can kind of tell that if he was isolating certain muscles in the gym, and then his body became less integrated on the field, and his brain was used to having this certain level of integration And then when he tried to go and do these things on the field, he didn't have that integration. So then that caused either a joint or like a soft tissue injury.
Well, and I mean, it goes back again to the point about, the kids who grew up playing in the favelas or, in the alleyways and stuff like that. They're just inherently learning full body. It's not just that they're outdoors. They're also, they're learning how to play with their full body and how everything kind of is integrated. And that's why they're often great in, close corners and stuff like that too. And, making those moves that nobody else can make, because they haven't thought in terms of like a series of different, training exercises. They've just learned in terms of their whole body, their whole lives.
Yeah, that's precisely what it is. I mean, there's no cone drill there. Like, there's no exercise that you can teach what you learn on the streets. The only way you can learn that is by actually doing it and being exposed to all the differing levels of talent and ability on the field of competition, which then molds you and pushes you to adapt and overcome. That's kind of the exponential possibilities of the game that no drill can really ever recreate.
So you think maybe someday Football Entangled can buy a football club and you can actually have, that's our club based around these principles?
That is the long-term vision for me and for the business. So, yeah, that's what I've always wanted, and that's kind of the drive behind everything. And really just to put into practice these principles, like you said, to really show, like, can we actually build talent from scratch and develop it in a way that moves the needle.
So how do people engage with you? I mean, do you work with kind of kids? Or do people come to you normally when they're kind of at the college level or the teenage level, or do you work with adults? Like, what are the kind of entry points into your practice?
Well, all my programs and courses are obviously available for everybody. But we primarily, I mean, like high school age players, college age players, usually are in the tribe and in my courses, and then I'll have older professional aged clients that I want to work one-on-one. And I do see quite a bit actually of older professional clients who are in their 30s that want to really increase their longevity as a professional athlete. Because I mean, every year that you extend your career is another year that like you're earning an income. So for them, it's pretty important.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and you're seeing more and more players playing well into their 30s, and ages that a generation ago most players were retired and burned out and injured by the time they got to that. I mean, Maradona probably retired when he was 31 or 32.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was injuring his body in lots of different ways. A different story.
Yeah, he was doing him.
He was doing him. So what is there anything that's exciting you kind of more recently? Like, are there any books you're reading, or any podcasts you're listening to, or any new kind of tools or toys that you're playing with these days that you're working to integrate into your practice in the future?
Yeah, I mean, over the summer, like we kind of revamped the internal foundation training system to kind of not move away from fascia, but kind of to evolve what fascia means, and looking at muscle tension and muscle trauma, and using a form of work called somatics, which uses the principles of depeniculation to release muscle trauma. And this, for example, when any human or any person yawns, that is an unconscious release of muscle trauma that nature coded into us to use. And that principle of where you kind of go into going into the contraction and then releasing out into the relaxation, that is what's called a peniculation. And so that principle, we can use that in a bunch of different forms of exercise to release certain muscle trauma across your whole body. And then there's another form of training called GOTA, which looks at the spiraling nature of effortless human biomechanics that we've also implemented into the system to not only, because the way I view the body is fascia is like the fascia work, like the fascia training is very focused on the functionality, like the function, and then the go-to work is very much more so focused on the form and how the body looks externally in motion. And then actually, I just spent some time in Lebanon working with a good friend named John Haddad, who also does a different form of fascia work, which was very exciting, and I'm looking forward to working with him more to learn, and in the future apply some more of that work with my clients.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So if people want to kind of follow you or get in touch with you, what are the best ways to do that?
I'd say Football Entangled on Instagram is a great place to start. We also have a second page on Instagram called The Entangled Footballer, which like funny enough is like getting better reach on there. But on YouTube as well, Football Entangled, like I have a podcast on there that we're about 9 or 10 episodes deep, and I do like walk and talk videos on there as well. So like YouTube, Instagram, and then the website is footballtruth.com, and on there, like you can sign up for the tribes, the courses, and you can email me to ask about like anything you need.
That's amazing. That's very cool. What kind of guests are you having on your podcast? Are you interviewing other football players or scientists or researchers, or what kind of stuff are you talking about?
Yeah, we've had coaches on there. We've had some trainers. We've had a few doctors, ex-players as well, current players also. The podcast is about the football truth, kind of just like chasing down what really is like the truth in the football world as far as health and performance and athletic excellence.
Very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. I mean, any kind of last thoughts you want to leave people with? If people are aspiring athletes or weekend athletes, what anything you want to leave people with today?
Yeah, I think I mean, like one of the funniest things that you hear me say all the time on Instagram is just go outside. And obviously after the podcast, I'll be going outside, don't worry. But it's just one of the funniest things because there's like, you have these, different trainers or different intellectuals in like sports science talk for years and years about something or something. But like, they're still not going outside. They're still not moving. They're still not playing a sport. And ultimately, like if you want to learn, you got to learn by doing and walking the walk. And oftentimes you get the biggest output of actionable knowledge by what you learn on the field in competition, because you get taught what works and what doesn't work really, really, really quick. That's what I've always prided myself on is, no, I'm not a doctor or like a scientist, but I've been able to take, mountains of knowledge and then apply it at a very high level of performance. And, 80% of that gets knocked out of the window really, really, really quick when you're playing against really good opponents. And so you get to basically fast forward on all the research and save years of like misplaced time and effort and get to what actually matters really quick. And that's kind of like the most important thing in life.
Yeah, that's very well said. Well, getting outside is a good prompt. I think you and I both need to go get outside and get some nuts.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
After staring at screens for a little while, but it was really nice to talk to you. Really great to catch up. And we are big fans here of all the stuff you're doing and the community you built. And personally, I grew up playing soccer and football, so it's also great to hear what impact you're having on the community and on the sport. So thank you for everything you're doing, and congratulations. Wishing you more success and growth.
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm looking forward to the rest of the year. It's been a good start so far.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Thanks, Taylor. Nice to.
All right, Jason. Thank you so much.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.